Thank you, guys. People can be aggravating, can't they? They just can. And people can be aggravating for a whole host of different reasons. We all, to varying degrees, are aggravating to someone for a variety of different reasons. But you probably have, I think we probably all have people in our lives who are like this, that can take what can only be described as good things and turn them into negatives. Things that you'd think that has to be a blessing and turn that somehow into being a liability. For example, you might have known people who at work, they got a big raise, and so their income is markedly higher, and what do? They gripe that they're paying more in taxes. Yeah, they're bringing home more money, but all they do is gripe about that they're paying more in taxes. Or it's the type of person who goes out and they go to Home Depot or Lowe's and they buy fertilizer and they cover their lawn with that, and their grass is thick and green and lush, and they just gripe about having to mow their grass more often. Taking anything that's positive and turning it into a negative. Let me give you another example. Children, as you know, can be a handful. It seems in our family we will be having a handful. Surprise, surprise, surprise. What are you doing to grow this church? We're doing our part. That's all I can say. Caroline shared that with me on Sunday night, and we had just finished watching 60 Minutes. I record that. We get the kids to bed, and so I'm watching 60 Minutes. My thoughts are on what the FBI director has been talking about, threats related to ISIS. I'm thinking about a segment where they talked about the exorbitant cost of chemotherapy drugs for cancer patients. And so that's what I'm thinking about. A fifth child is not anywhere on my radar screen, and Caroline shares this news. Now, hearing that news, there are some thoughts that I entertained, some I even communicated. Here's one thought. We started buying diapers in December of 2005. As I figure it, somewhere, maybe late 2018, we will stop buying diapers. No, but then Caroline and I will need Depends, and so we'll never get out of it. I told Caroline, though, in addition, at some point, we'll be going to a restaurant, and the hostess will say, "How many?" And we will say 7. I said, "We're going to automatically pay the group gratuity rate, and no one is with us." She laughed at that, and she said, "You know, with 5 kids, we'll never be going to a restaurant where you have a waitress." But it was a surprise to me, and very easily and very quickly you can begin to think some things that could be negative, some things that could spawn a sense of fear or unease or uncertainty. There's diapers, there's clothes, there's doctor bills, there's books, there's stuff, to say nothing of the expense of college. There's all of these things that very easily and very quickly you could turn to and describe as being negatives. Negatives in the face of positives like this. This child and every child is a gift from God. Beyond that, this child and every child, their conception, their birth, their development, all of that is nothing short of a miracle, and we get a front row seat to it. Beyond that, this child will present us with another opportunity to pour into their lives and not simply invest in them and show them love and give them guidance for living, but to tell them about God, to tell them about His Word, to tell them how they can have a personal relationship with Him. so that they can grow up to be a man, that they can grow up to be a woman that God uses to positively and eternally affect the lives of those that they come in contact with. It gives us the opportunity as parents to have generational influence. That's an amazing positive. Another positive is that we'll have 5 kids to put into the kiddies so that Caroline and I get a really nice nursing home. I mean, there's all of these amazing positives. These amazing positives. And very easily, very quickly, you could take something that is nothing short of a God-given blessing and turn it somehow into a liability. Now, you know and you have interacted with people that have done that. What I would want you to recognize this morning is that that is something that Satan loves to do. It is absolutely a tool within his tool belt to take anything, even the choicest of God's blessings, and somehow twist them, somehow contort them, somehow twist them in such a way that he uses them not for our good, but for our destruction. On this day where we as a church family celebrate our 40th anniversary, I want you to understand that Satan even seeks to take the blessing of this church and the ways in which God has worked and even until this present moment is working, and seeks to use these blessings as a tool against us. A weapon in his hands, not for our benefit, but for our harm. The question then is this: how does he do that? How does he do that? We see the answer to that today in Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you would look with me there in your Bibles. Deuteronomy chapter 6, and we're going to start reading with verse 10. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 10. The Lord's talking to his people there, and he says, "So it shall be," and we've spoken through Moses to the people, "So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you have eaten and are full, then beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him and take oaths in his name." And we'll pick up some of the verses that follow, but this sets the stage for us. And I really believe gives us insight into how it is that Satan takes this tool, and it's so deceptive and it's so slick how he does this, that he can even take good things, God-given blessings, and he can twist them and he can contort them in such a way that he uses them against us, not to bring about our good, not to bring about our gain, but to ultimately bring about our loss and ultimately our destruction, not merely as individuals, but even collectively as a church family. So how does he do that? Well, he prompts us with some thoughts, and the first thought is this: he prompts us with feelings of personal accomplishment. He prompts us with feelings of personal accomplishment. Let me set the stage for you as to what's going on. The Israelites have been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And for 400 years, they didn't want to be slaves. And they longed for this land that God had told them was one day going to be theirs, this promised land, the land of Canaan. But it takes 400 years before God actively intervenes, brings about their freedom. He does this, first of all, by raising up Moses to be their leader. Then he works, and you remember the series of plagues, Pharaoh's attention. These plagues that get the Pharaoh's attention, and finally and reluctantly, he lets the Israelites go. They don't know where the promised land is. They don't have a map. There's no GPS, and so God supernaturally guides them. Well, as they are traveling out of Egypt, remember the Pharaoh has a change of heart. He sends his armies to go and bring them back, and the Israelites have the Red Sea in front of them, Pharaoh's armies behind them, and what does God do? He miraculously intervenes, causes the waters of the Red Sea to part. The Israelites march through, Pharaoh's armies come into that dry land, and the water comes in, envelops them, and Pharaoh's armies are drowned. God continues to guide them both during the day and even during the night. By the time you get to Deuteronomy chapter 5, what has happened is that as they're making their way to the promised land, they come to Mount Sinai, and God leads Moses up to the mountain and meets with Moses and gives to him and to his people through Moses the 10 Commandments. At this point, they are on their final leg of the journey that's going to lead them to the promised land. And before they go in, God has for them some important warnings. He has some very grave cautions to remind them of. And as the passage unfolds, he says, and paints the picture for them. He says, you're going to experience large and beautiful cities that you didn't build. You didn't have to even pay taxes to construct these, but they'll be your cities. You're going to be in houses that you didn't have to deal with a contractor on, that you didn't have to build, that you didn't have to get a mortgage for. These homes are not only going to be in existence, but they're going to be full of good things. There's going to be furniture, and there's going to be pots, and there's going to be bowls, and all these things are going to be there, things that will be yours that you did not buy. Beyond that, he says there's going to be wells. There's going to be plenty of water in these cities, and you're not going to have had to turn the first shovel to dig down to get that water. It's just going to be there. Beyond that, he says you're going to experience the fruit of vineyards and olive trees, these groves that you have never, ever had to plant, never had to maintain, never do anything. It's just going to be yours. They are getting ready, and they are on the cusp of experiencing amazing, unparalleled blessings from the hand of God. And before they experience them, God gives them this very stern warning in verse 12, beware lest you forget the Lord. Beware lest you forget the Lord. Why is it you think that God was giving them this warning? Why do you think before they even experience these blessings, God is saying, hey, time out. Be on guard so that you don't forget me. Well, I believe it's for two reasons. One, because God understands human nature, but beyond that, He also understands satanic activity. And it would be Satan's goal to be at work and even take these enormous, inordinate blessings from the hand of God and so twist them that they are no longer a blessing, but rather cause the people harm. But how exactly would He do that? Well, I believe by prompting feelings of personal accomplishment. God was warning them because He understood that the day was going to come, and whether through even human nature or through Satan's direct involvement, they were going to be sitting back at some point. And they're going to be in a city that they didn't build, in a home they didn't have to buy, full of furniture and stuff that they didn't have to go to the store and get, drinking water from wells they didn't dig, eating olives and having from vineyards that they didn't plant. And at some point, the temptation very much is going to be to fold your arms, put a smile on your face, and say, man, look at what we've done. Man, look at where we are. Look at what we have accomplished. And Satan actively would be working to spawn and to propagate those thoughts so that they would take the blessings of God and not view them as being from the hand of God, rather as the fruit of their own personal accomplishment, what they have been able to do on their own. I've heard Shep use an expression before that maybe you have heard. It's like somebody being born on third and thinking they've hit a triple. I mean, they're getting ready to wind up on third, and very easily they could think to themselves and tell themselves, hey, we hit a triple. Look at what we have done. Look at what we have accomplished. We've gotten here. We're experiencing this because of what we have done. And Satan would be taking the absolute choicest of God's blessings and generating something terribly negative. That they forget these are from the hand of God, and they begin to think, hey, look at what we have done. Now listen, this is Satan's one of a great tool, a slick tool in his tool belt. But it's something that he doesn't merely use against individuals, whether it was in the day of Moses or today. But it's something that he also does collectively, something that he does even towards churches. Very easily, on this 40th anniversary of our church, we could stop and look back. And some of you were here 40 years ago. Or maybe not here, but you were part of the core group that formed what would become Gate City Baptist Church. And very easily, 4 decades later, you could look back, or others that have come along the way could look back and say, man, it's hard to think just back to when we started meeting in homes, just this small core group, and then began to grow, bought a plot of land, old farmland, out where there was essentially nothing, built a building, called Bill Claffey as the first pastor. Church began to grow, began to expand its buildings. It's continued to do so. And man, look at where we are today. Man, a church seated on 19 acres. We've got these beautiful facilities. We've got ball fields, even with lights, and we've got wonderful picnic shelter. We've got all this room for growth. We've even got new carpet now. We've got all of these wonderful things. Look at what we have done. We have come so far, and we've been able to reach, and we are so much bigger than we were when we first started. And over these years, we have given, and we have trained, and we have invested, and we've been able to magnify our influence in this community significantly. Look at what we've done. Very easily, we could say that. And we could take even the blessing of this church. Satan could use that to generate a negative so that you or I or collectively we would think, man, look at what we've done. We have come so far. We have done so much. Jesus had something to say about that. You probably remember it. It's in John chapter 15, and he said very simply this, I am the vine, you are the branches. The one that abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you, me, we can do nothing. Apart from him, we have done nothing. But Satan wants to deceive us. He wants us to pat ourselves on the back and say, man, look at what you have done. He prompts us with feelings of personal accomplishment. I remember back a number of weeks ago, we had our Power Camp Sunday. It was the culmination of a week of sports camp. And on that particular Sunday, if you were here, it was a great day. It was a great service. But quite frankly, it's one that I had very little, almost nothing to do with. I was nominally involved in its planning. I didn't preach. That Sunday we had a guest speaker. I had nothing to do with the music. I didn't share a testimony. I think all I did was do the welcome, and I said a prayer, introduced the guest speaker. That was it. Once the service was over, though, I went to where I normally stand, which is at the back, and I'm greeting people as they're leaving. And I think, quite frankly, there were people that didn't know exactly what to say to me. I mean, what you would like to have said was, get out of my way, I'm hungry. But you didn't say that. Instead, you said things like, thank you so much. That service was such a blessing to me. Thanking me for what I have done, saying that it's such a blessing. Now, very easily, I might be able to take that and say, well, pat myself on the back, look at what I have done, but I recognized I had essentially nothing to do with this. I just showed up. And if a blessing was to be experienced, if anything of consequence occurred, it's not at all because I did it, rather it's because God did it. It is that mentality that God is telling His people in Moses' day. It is that truth that He is reminding of us on this day, on our 40th anniversary. If anything has happened, and things have, if there are any blessings that have been experienced, and they are, it is not because of what you have done. It's not because of together what we have done. Rather, it's because the God of this universe has done something among us. But Satan doesn't want us to think that. He wants to prompt us with feelings of personal accomplishment. But beyond that, he wants to add to that and prompt feelings of self-reliance. He wants to prompt feelings of self-reliance. Again, he is so slick in this. And if he can get you, as you are beginning to experience, or as you are, collectively or individually experiencing God's blessings, if he can get you to the point and place where you start to think of those as being the fruit of your labor, a reward for your sacrifice, the payoff for your investment, if he can get you to think, hey, this is about you, then it makes you so susceptible for his next line of attack, which is to get you to think, hey, what I'm experiencing it is because of my work. Look at what I have done. And if he can get you to think, look at what I have done, then he can get you to think, look at what all I can do. Look at what all I can do. Taking God out of the equation and increasingly developing this sense of self-reliance where we're effectively dependent on Him for nothing. So that we look back and we say, well, man, look at all these things that I've accomplished as a church. We can say, look at these ministries, look at these things that are in existence, look at these buildings that have been erected, or in the individual life. Look at these particular blessings and say, man, this is all the fruit of what I have done. And if He can get you to that point, very easily, He can get you to cross the line so that you get to the place where you say, God, who needs Him? Who needs Him? That's why the Lord told His people in verse 12, beware lest you forget the Lord, and He continues, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So God's taken them in their minds all the way back to Egypt. And He's saying, listen, you're getting ready to experience unparalleled blessing. And as you experience those, I want you to remember something. Were it not for me, you'd have never left Egypt. Were it not for me, you would still be baking bricks for Pharaoh's construction projects. Were it not for my intervention, you wouldn't have a leader like Moses. Were it not for my deliverance, you'd still be sitting in Egypt. Those plagues would have never occurred. You would have stayed there. Were it not for me, when you came to the Red Sea, well, Pharaoh's armies would have carted you straight back to Egypt. Were it not for me, you wouldn't be here in the first place. What Satan wants you to do is to think, hey, look at what I have done. Everything I experience, every good thing that I am partaking of is because what I have done or what we have together accomplished. What God wants us to do and the perspective that He wants us to have is very simply the opposite. Everything, every blessing is because He's done it. God's trying to say to His people, listen, you needed me in the past. You would still be in Egypt were it not for me. You have needed me along this journey because if you didn't have me, you wouldn't know where to go. When you come into the land of promise and you begin to conquer it, as you experience victory, the military victory I'm going to give you, it's going to be because you need me. God's trying to remind them in advance, you've needed me in the past, you need me in the present, you're going to need me in the future. But Satan's trying to say, it's not about what he's done, it's about what you've done. And since you're so capable, and since you have been so successful in generating all these amazing results, God, who effectively needs Him? Back during the summer, our children's ministry sponsored a family bowling outing. And it was on a Saturday. We met over at one of the bowling alleys on Wendover. And I had taken our 3 boys there. And when we got there, we got our shoes, we got the lanes, and if it's been a while since you've been to the bowling alley, you might not be aware of the fact of just how computerized that process is now. Now, it used to be you'd have these paper scorecards, and then you'd have to get somebody to teach you how to keep score in bowling. You don't have to do any of that anymore, and you just put your names in the computer of everybody that's playing on your lane, and as you're doing so, it'll ask you for each individual player, do you want the bumpers? Now, you may not be aware that bowling lanes have bumpers. And what they are, normally you don't see them. But at the edge of the lane, just before the gutters begin, they have these things that will come up that go the entire length of the lane, about, I don't know, maybe a foot. And what it does is that it keeps the ball from going in the gutter. And so they're ideal for children or for bowlers that aren't very good. It helps their score out, and that way they're not throwing a gutter ball. Anyway, so as I've put the names in for myself and for the boys, for them, I had the bumpers come up. And this was Big Phil's first time going bowling, and early in this series of frames, Big Phil goes up, and really the ball is too heavy, and his hand is too small to really hold it as he should, so he's just kind of holding it like this, and he just goes up and flings it. The problem is, it doesn't go into the lane, it goes straight into the gutter. I mean, so it's not the bumper can't stop it. He's thrown it straight in the gutter, and the ball is wedged in the gutter, being held in place by that bumper about 6 feet into the lane. That's a problem. And so I think, and I'm aware of the fact, they've got signs everywhere that say, hey, do not cross the line going into the lane. If you need assistance, if there's a problem, you call and ask for help. But I looked at that and I thought, man, that ball is just 6 feet down in the gutter. I could call for help. There's no need for that. Man, I can do this on my own. I will do this on my own. And so I march off into the lane. It's just 6 feet down, and I discovered something. Bowling lanes are very, very, very slick. In fact, they're not just slick, they are oiled. Daily, those lanes are oiled. I mean, I've been ice skating before, but the ice has nothing on a slick, greased bowling lane. And so, quite frankly, I want to do this in a hurry because I don't want to get fussed at by the staff. And so I just want to go grab it and run. And so I'm walking quickly, and no sooner have my feet crossed that line, and I'm going fast, my feet come up like this, and I come crashing down. I don't recall what I said. I remember a few things that I thought. And honestly, one of my first thoughts was this. I wonder if I broke my hip. I know I'm 39 years old, but I hit that hard where it could have happened. But thankfully, I was not hurt. I was sore for a couple of days, but I was not hurt. But all of that happened for this very simple reason. I told myself, help? I don't need any help. Look at what I can do. Listen, it is exactly that same premise that Satan wants you to operate on. And he wants you to operate with premise to generate the same result. Satan wants you to get to the point individually, for us collectively as a fellowship, to get to the point where we can say, hey, we can do this on our own for this reason, so that we will fall. Taking inordinate blessings of God, even this church, and using them against us, prompting feelings of personal accomplishment, prompting feelings of self-reliance, but there's a final way that he uses this, and that is to prompt assurance of continued blessing. To prompt assurance of continued blessing. In verse 17, God tells them, you shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, His testimonies and His statutes, which He's commanded you. Verse 18, he underscores that you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, and this is the promise, that it may be well with you, that you may go in and possess the good land of which the Lord swore to your fathers. Get that. They are getting ready to experience amazing and unparalleled blessings, the choicest of blessings from God that they will have ever received thus far in their lives. And God is saying to them, understand this. You had better do and continue to do as I say, so that you might be able to experience and be able to keep this land. Do you see what He's doing? He is linking His blessings, His continued blessings, to our continued obedience. There's an inextricable link that God is establishing between His continued blessing being contingent on our continued obedience. Satan's goal, however, is to cause us to be blind to that linkage. What he wants us to do is to experience God's blessings, and as we do, essentially forget about Him. Tell ourselves, hey, look at what we have done. Get to the point where we can say, hey, we can do all this without Him. And just expect that the good times are going to keep rolling. That the blessings are going to continue just to be experienced. That the good times don't ever come to an end. Why does Satan want us to think that? Because if he can get us to that point, he is aware of the fact that at some point that well of blessing will dry up. Satan understands that God's blessings are linked to our obedience. And if he can get us just doing our own thing, well, then at some point those blessings will dry up. And as and when they do, we'll begin to look toward heaven with a phenomenal sense of frustration, even feelings of anger and resentment. God, why is this now happening? Why have you taken this from me? Why are you robbing me of these pleasures? Why is it that you have removed these blessings from me? And the goal is for him to get you to blame God for the absent blessings, for you to take your own personal involvement out of the equation. And if you can blame God for it, then maybe, just maybe, you'll get so disillusioned, you'll get so discouraged, you'll get so distraught that maybe, just maybe, you'll turn your back on Him. And to accomplish that, Satan wants you to think as God's blessings come, they'll just keep coming, prompting this false sense of assurance. The good times, they're just going to keep rolling, regardless of what I do, even in the absence of my own obedience, even in the absence of our collective obedience before the Lord. I don't know about you, but I love cherry soft drinks. In fact, I have, as long as I can remember, I have loved them. But my favorite drink at this point is Diet Cherry Dr. Pepper. And I don't know if you have tried it, but it's wonderful. It is delicious. I think it will probably be the exclusive beverage served at the marriage supper of the Lamb. I think it's that good. I cannot tell you over the past couple of years how many times, though, I've had conversation with people and something is said about soft drinks, and I'll say, hey, have you tried Diet Cherry Dr. Pepper? And if they say no, I'll encourage them, hey, you really ought to try it. I think it's delicious. Or if you don't like diet drinks, get the regular kind. But that cherry is just delicious. Now, the question is, why do I tell people about this? Well, ultimately, there are two reasons that I share that. First of all, I just think it's that good. And I really like it. I anticipate it could make somebody else's day by drinking this. I think it's that good. So I want them to experience it as well. But there is a greater reason that I have told people about this. Very simply, I want them to taste it so that they'll buy it so that Dr. Pepper will keep making it. Because you're aware of how soft drink companies work. Periodically, they'll bring out a new flavor, they'll bring out a new product, and they'll plan on it running for a little while to test and see what the response is. And if it goes into various markets and people buy it, well, then they'll keep making it and they'll keep selling it. But if people just aren't buying it, or if they're not buying it in sufficient numbers, what do? Well, they say, well, we'll try something else. They quit making it, they quit selling it. In a nutshell, this is the thought I want you to get. Your response in the present determines your experience in the future. Your response in the present determines your experience in the future. God has inextricably linked His blessings to our obedience to Him. And if we want to continue to experience His blessings in the future, it requires our obedience, our continued obedience in the present. Jesus could not have made this principle more clear than what He did in Luke chapter 11, where He said, "Blessed are those who hear the word of God and obey." Jesus Himself has linked the blessings of God with our obedience to Him. But Satan wants you blind. He wants me, and collectively He wants us as a church blind to that link. He wants us to just be doing our own thing, patting ourselves on the back for our accomplishments, increasingly getting to the point where we're operating independently from God and just thinking and assuming that the blessings are just going to continue to be unfurled in our life, both individually and collectively. But that will only happen, exclusively happen when we're following Him. God is absolutely good, and He is the giver of inordinate blessings. Satan is a liar. He's a deceiver. And he wants to and will take anything, even the blessings of God, and use them as a tool with which to put down. The question, though, is this: is it possible that he's been successful in using this tool against you? Is it possible that he has used this tool successfully against you? To help you answer that question, can have you answer just to yourself a few thoughts. Do you ever experience something good, anything that might be construed at all as a blessing, and chalk it up to being at the right place at the right time? Do you regularly take inventory of the good things, of the blessings in your life and intentionally thank God for them? Do you ever find yourself in your service for God, even as a part of the ministries of this church, after witnessing some measure of success, and you think to yourself, at all, look at what I've done? Do you view any strength or success of this church, any success in the past or in the present, as at all being the fruit of your labor? Does your life, does your walk with the Lord, does it at all demonstrate to other people, I'm dependent on Him? Your answers to those questions may very well clearly be indicating there's some decisions you need to make. There's some choices you need to make. There's some things that you need to talk about with God today. The question is, will you? Won't you bow your heads with me? You just heard those questions. And the Spirit of God, far more than I, can and even now is helping you to answer those questions. What we're talking about is awfully important because Israel was on its final leg of the journey towards the Promised Land, getting ready to experience amazing, unparalleled blessings from the hand of God. God recognized it was important enough to tell them these things because He understood and knew that their continued experience of blessings, well, it was contingent on their response to Him, whether they'd be dependent on Him, whether they'd remain obedient to Him. Does your life reflect that type of dependence on Him? Does your life reflect and do your words communicate to others, whether as an individual, as a family, or you as a part of this church, that if anything of consequence happens, it's because God has done it? As God's helping you answer those questions, some of you need to just talk to Him this morning and have some honest, candid conversation. Maybe what you need to do during this time of decision is to find yourself